Good evening. Welcome to the School Leadership Consortium Fall 2017 Leadership Lecture, Pathways to Educational Leadership. I am Sharonda Willingham, the founder and president of School Leadership Consortium. School Leadership Consortium is a collaborative think tank in which graduate students, alumni, and leading experts in the field of education can come together to scrutinize the complex world of education. As an organization, we fundamentally understand that we are the innovators who will explore today's issues and come up with viable solutions for our schools. Our mission is to examine the highest standards of leadership that promotes virtuous change within society's educational institutions. Our vision is to create school leaders that understand the moral contract they have with humanity to produce citizens that can meet the challenges of our time. SLC will create an environment for school leaders to grapple with the complex problems through openness, collaboration, a thirst for learning, a heart of service, and a reflective mindset. As a consortium, we acknowledge that our educational system is the foundation of all that functions or failed to function in our society. Every profession, from doctors, lawyers, physicists, educators, and beyond, have come through the doors of the United States educational system. It is only when school leaders facilitate a healthy climate that educators can produce an enlightened, ingenious, and results-oriented citizenry. School leadership is eager and excited to contribute to the charge of creating effective school leaders here and abroad. If you're interested in joining School Leadership Consortium, please see one of the members of our leadership team or me. I would like to introduce them at this time, so throughout the evening you could tag them and give them your information if you would like to talk with them about our organization. So first we have Kristen Kojik, our first Vice President of Operations. And we have Rachel Nash, our second Vice President of Research. She's still out there. You saw her when you came in. We have Mallory Wright, who is our Director of Outreach. And we have Malcolm Rowe, who is our Treasurer. So again, if you see them tonight, please talk with them about joining our organization. We are so excited and enthusiastic to have this wonderful organization. We're looking for very enthusiastic and passionate people who understand what education can do for society and help us with creating school leaders. I would be remiss if I did not introduce the lady who needs no introduction, Dr. Annette Campbell-Anderson. She has been an ardent supporter of school leadership from its inception. Her intelligence, her prowess, and warmth have been the catalyst to lead our organization to where it is. So I'm so grateful that we have her to assist us. So next, So I will have our first Vice President of Operation, Kristen Kojak, to come up to introduce our guest speaker for today. And hashtag Greater Impact 2017 to tweet tonight's event.
In this role, Sheree Davis supports the professional growth of teacher leaders, assistant principals, and principals to ensure high-quality, blended learning instruction that utilizes digital content. Her passionate, innovative, and equity-centered leadership style was curated while serving in a variety of instructional and administrative leadership roles at the Center for Social Organization of Schools. Rooted in school reform, research-based practices, her leadership influence as a school transformation facilitator, professional developer, and school student support services coordinator has had a significant impact on the steady climb of the nation's graduation rate, as well as within the greater Baltimore learning community. Sheree Davis is a skilled professional developer, new teacher mentor, and highly sought after school improvement collaborative partner to school and district level administrators. Ms. Davis holds a Bachelor's of Educational Studies from Kent State University, a master's degree in special education from Towson University, and a certificate in administration and supervision from Johns Hopkins University. She has received a host of awards for her excellence in teaching, humanitarian efforts, and dedication to the education profession. Ms. Davis lives in Baltimore County and has a daughter who attends the University of Maryland College Park. Please help me in welcoming Ms. Davis.
Wow. Can everybody hear me? Is it on? It's not on? Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You make it sound so much better. Wow. I wasn't really sure as we begin our talk tonight just what to say to get myself started with you. Part of me feel like I'm at home, especially when I look out and see faces that I'm quite familiar with. The other part of me knows for a fact that this is not home and that you got to be ready for this moment right now. So I'll say this to you, a little over 2 years ago, I was in this room as a student, learning, as an employee, learning. Some of the greatest minds have spoken in this room, so it's truly an honor to be here with you tonight in this capacity. A little bit about where we're going to go tonight in my presentation. Where's the clicker? Did I lose it? Thank you. A little bit about me. I didn't spend much time putting anything about myself on the slide, so I'll just be really brief. As she so eloquently spoke, I am a graduate of Kent State University, but sometimes I think what's more important than that is actually, where I came from, and that was the city of Cleveland, Ohio, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm the very first person in my family to attend and graduate college. I'm pleased to say many people have followed behind me. So before I share some of my career experiences, there are some things that I didn't put on the slide that I think are important for you to understand as I go through my path of my presentation. Then you'll see why I kind of say what I say. First thing is, I used to be a teacher's assistant at the Good Shepherd School's Therapeutic Treatment Center for Emotionally Disturbed Girls in Baltimore. I was also a substitute teacher, and I will say that when I secured a teaching position in Baltimore City, I was a provisionally certified teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. Do we have any Baltimore City Public School folks here? Hey, I proudly say I earned all my stripes in Baltimore City Public Schools. Spent about 10 years in the classroom, and as you'll see when I go through, you'll see most of my experiences occurred in the classroom. Of course, that's where I believe all the magic happens. So as we move along, if you have questions, I really like things to feel like a learning environment, even though I'm here to give a lecture. So I really would appreciate it if you either jotted a question down or needed an opportunity to speak, that you would come to the mic. So pathways to educational leadership. I think this diagram is most fitting, can take us in many, many, many directions. But I'd like to start here with a fact, and I like to walk, so if it bothers anybody, let me know. And if you take this as fact from John Maxwell says that 90% of all leadership occurs from the middle of an organization. So let's just replace the word organization and put school there. And think about your school. If you're in a school, wherever you are, think about all of the people that the principal is trying to facilitate to ensure effectiveness for students in their school. What roles are they in? Department chairs, right? Assistant principals. Oh, I'm the leader of the instructional leadership team. That's the middle of the school. Most people sit in those positions. If we really look at that and then say to ourselves, well, what if the one person that is the leader is not us? Do you not have influence in the school? Do you not have a way to make an impact on learning? You really do, and that's one thing I've learned a lot. So I thought this was a good fact to begin with. A little bit about my journey. This is one thing I can say. When I had to sit down and think about what my journey has been, I said, oh, you gotta find a theme. You've done way too many things. You gotta narrow this down. You got 45 minutes. So I looked for 3 themes, and this was based on assignments I did as a student here. I was a journaler as a teacher. I kept a journal. I'm also a journaler as a leader, and I would highly suggest that to you, but these are the 3 things I came across. The first one was a commitment to academic excellence. And it sounds corny, it sounds cliche, right? But if I tell you how I arrived at this, it was one of the hardest things I had to do, and it wasn't until about 5 years into teaching that I had a real answer that was really valuable. We'll talk about that as I move through. The second one is preparation and opportunity. People that know me know I'm a huge follower of who? Thank you, Oprah. And Oprah always says that luck is, preparation and opportunity sort of lining up. I see that in my life. So, I get haggled a lot for always working, always studying, always learning, but I always felt prepared for moments. And if I didn't think I was prepared, I would never have stepped out for a job or emailed somebody and said, hey, here's my resume. If you hear of anything, you have to be prepared for those moments. So that was the second theme. And then the third theme, this one, as I look at my quirky resume, and I always tell people I can have 3 different resumes if I wanted. I realized that I was not only creating pathways for myself, I was also curating them. And there is a difference, and hopefully we'll generate a little discussion about that. My journey. Official titles went here, not all those other ones. My first role then was as special educator, founding teacher, team leader, professional developer, school transformation facilitator, school student support services, curriculum developer, specialist today. But here's what's interesting about this, and this is what reflection does for you. These 3 are all really classroom based, right? So all of this is happening in the classroom. So I'm looking at my old journals and all, and I'm looking and I say to myself, how many other founding teachers do I know? Anybody know anybody that founded a school? Not you, you know. Okay. Yep, you started it, like you built it. You talked about what the vision and the mission of the school would be. You talked about what students should wear, how we're gonna incentivize everything, where students will come in, how they'll wear their uniforms. That gives you an experience unlike anything else. And you think you know instruction. Try and open a school and try and develop an instructional vision for a school. You realize just how much you don't know? That's what I say. So these 3 positions, as a special educator and as a team leader, those were all really classroom based, but the experience was invaluable. Things began to change somewhere around these 3. And if I said I was going to circle one and I didn't, I would have circled school transformation facilitator. Professional developer, as you know, PD is hard. Anybody hate going to PDs? Raise your hand if you hate going to PDs. That's because you've never been to mine. No, I'm just kidding. But the truth is, PD is a hard sell. And the reason it's a hard sell is sometimes it's one and done, right? Or the principal says we all had to come, so we came. What's the relevance to what my kids need right now? And one thing I pride myself on as a professional developer is making sure I'm catering to the needs of the students. Even if the principal says, not this, we need this, I try my best to help them see how, if you do this, it'll get you there. But these positions really sort of define the curves in my career. Anybody ever heard of a school transformation facilitator? Don't feel bad. Not too many HR departments have either, apparently, because people ask all the time, what is that? If you ever look that up, the description, that is a position that I held here at Johns Hopkins through a program at the Center for the Social Organization of Schools. In that position, you are about at the same level of an assistant principal. So in that role, you make decisions for a school, you comb data, you deal with budgets, you observe teachers, you do the whole 9. People don't understand that. And what I realized, and you'll see later in my talk, you have to learn how to sell yourself and help people understand what you do. And then, of course, the school student support services coordinator position, as far as I'm concerned, that's the position that took me all over the United States. Because all of those positions were held in a school reform model. When you go to change schools from the ground up, redesign schools and reorganize schools, you're doing everything. You're picking textbooks, you're deciding professional development, you're trying to secure Title II funds to have extended PD plans. And it gave me a wonderful experience working with everyone from CEOs of the school district to school-based coaches, teachers, implementing coaching cycles. But the other key piece here, this position taught me how to focus on data. And not all data is important. There's a few points that are. And then, of course, curriculum developer. Someone told me right here in a class, we had an online class here. For anybody took curriculum development here as a student, online? Okay. So online is pretty hard. And I remember the professor, she and I back and forth, because I had a fundamental belief about something, and she, I think, wanted the textbook answer. And I had to tell her that it was my experience, that this is what it was like, and so she helped me see the connection. But at that point, I remember complaining about that class to someone, and somebody said, oh no, if you can get curriculum development down, you just changed the game for yourself. And it made me look at my career differently. It made me look at the class, and I said, okay. And so now, here I am, a specialist, and I have to say this, my director and my boss is here right now, and I can tell you that I like being a specialist. Anybody know what an educational specialist is? I'm so happy people don't know. Because these are the types of leadership positions that exist that can really change the game for your district, for a school, and you don't have to be the principal to do that. And so, where am I going after this? I have no idea. Right now, I really love what I do, and I'll be honest with you, it's not one of those jobs I did not love what I do. And I'm really glad that in the room right now is at least one person that represents every one of these jobs I've had right now. So that's good to know. I'm pretty passionate about what I do. That was a 21-year journey, and here I am now. I couldn't talk about this without talking about leadership values. And I'm gonna skim through these. You know, you gotta have leadership values, right? That's School 101. The first 4 values I had now since I say the classroom. I've always had them. The 5th value came after working in Baltimore County Public Schools, because I realized just how important this work is that we do and just how hard we need to work to make sure everyone gets a fair shot at a diploma. And so my 5th leadership value is equity. I like integrity because at the end of the day, it builds trust with people. Anybody that I've worked with, if I work with you 1 day, 200 days, I keep my word. And if I don't, I'm really sorry for it, and I'll let you know. But in innovation, I value innovation because we're trying to solve problems. If you work in credit recovery, if you're trying to help a school's attendance rate get higher or move the school's GPA, new ideas will work. And I can honestly tell you, from the middle, if you're working from the middle, I think you have a much, I guess you could say, a bigger impact on what happens in a school when it comes to innovation. I know teachers who sit quietly in their classroom and are building masterpieces of lesson plans. No one knows about it. Because in that school, there hasn't been a forum or a pocket where innovation can kind of breed and grow. I believe every strong leader allows an employee to kind of flex their innovation hand. I thank goodness I work for people who just believe in innovation every day. It seems like everyone around me is an innovator, so it feels good. But the 3rd leadership value that I hold dear to my heart is service, because it's just really people first, and in this case, our end user, which is our students. Ethics, my first paper as a student here at Hopkins was on ethics. And I realized, boy, a lot of educators don't do it the acceptable way. Like, we need to make sure as leaders that we're doing things proper and acceptable. And that really can look different sometimes based on where you are, but there's some fundamentals, you know, you just never leave behind it. We have to make sure we're doing things right way. And then finally, equity. And you hear it a lot. Has anybody ever Googled the term educational equity? Anybody recall how many hits you get back now? All right, like it's a lot of hits now. There are institutes started around equity. What I love the most about it, everybody's eyes are open now that not every student is getting a fair shake. And it's on our backs. Those of us that are leading from the middle, leading from the side, as John Maxwell would say, 360-degree leadership. Anybody familiar? He's phenomenal. Because that is what creates equity for students. Everybody, I would say, primarily the folks in the middle. Principals are the visionaries. Do I have any principals here? You don't mind? Okay. All right, good. I don't want to get in any trouble. But I can tell you, working for the good of all students, these are my 5 values. Now, what's really important, so we have our values, and it's like when we talk about leadership, you can't talk about it without talking about values, your strengths. I had never really looked at my strengths as a leader until I worked here at Hopkins, and I had to do a presentation for all the executive directors in our program across the country. So our CEO came to me and said, Ms. Dick, we want you, the PD person, we want you. I was like, okay, who are we training? And when he told me who we were training, I thought, okay, so where do we start with them? Like, you know, beside you, they are it. So what do you mean? And he said, I don't think they understand their strengths. So because I like to do what it is I ask other folks to do, I took the strength-based leadership out of Gallup, you know, the survey. And these were my 5 strengths. Now, I must tell you they're a little dated because I took them 4 years ago. I'm curious to take it again because there is one column. Anybody ever took a strength-based assessment? So they tell you if you're an influencer, if you're an executor, if you're this. I don't have anything in the influence column. Now, that was 4 years ago. I was like, is this right? As much as I want to be, I didn't have one indicator. So I'm going to take it again, see what happens. But these speak to who I am and my leadership. And that matters because I believe it has created some career pathways for me. I do have a story. I couldn't do this without telling a story. Anybody remember 2003 here in Baltimore? Who's old enough to remember? We had 28.2 inches of snow. We were out of school, you remember, we were out of school about 11 days. So I was at my 5th year of teaching. We weren't quite at BTD yet. We weren't there, right? So when I knew we were going to be in a snowstorm, I said, oh, I'm going to go get a book. I'm going to get all my stuff together. I idolized Marva Collins. Anybody know Marva Collins? Wow. Let me tell you just a little bit about her. She started her own school. She was a Chicago public school teacher. She started her own school in her basement with 4 students, 2 of which were her own. In 1975, she took her $5,000 pension, put some chalkboards in there, asked people to give her books, and then wrote all of the schools and said, send me the kids you don't want. I don't know how many schools she has now. Rest her soul, she passed away in 2015, and when they were reading her story, I couldn't believe that she had amassed a staggering 43 honorary doctoral degrees for teaching. In 1980, Ronald Reagan asked her to lead the U.S. Department of Education. She humbly declined and simply said, I don't want to leave my students. Why does this story matter? I picked this book up because I was at 5 years of teaching, had been new teacher of the year, only uncertified person on the school improvement team, all that good stuff. But as far as I was concerned, I was a mediocre teacher. No one had told me that, but I felt that way because I taught special education, and if I had 27 students take the government exam, 12 passed, my principal was ecstatic saying no one in special ed had ever passed. I was so angry. I was like, I couldn't even make it to like 15 or 20. So I felt like I was a mediocre teacher. I picked this book up and I started reading it. On this day, I found my teaching purpose, and I realized what my issue was. I'll never forget, page 20 said, I'm not going to read it all, right, spell it all, but page 20 basically said, if you want to avoid mediocrity, stop believing that the little bit of resources you have is all that you have. Education is attached to everything. Learning is attached to everything. So I went back and said, okay, because I was writing, asking for books on this, asking for things, and you know us as teachers, they don't have any money for anything. My kids can't do their projects. I felt limited. I had a limited mindset, but the truth was I was not limited. And by page 21, I realized that I found my purpose. Never thinking about career pathways and leadership, none of that, just wanted to be a good teacher. Now, you don't have to have texting. You don't have to have any rates applied to anything. But I'm very curious before we talk about purpose. Has anybody ever explored the question of what is purposeful leadership? So I'm asking you to do that for a hot second. So if you have a cell phone, if you go to mentimeter.com, put this code in, and you can enter up to 3 one-word responses. That's okay. Just 3 one-word responses. What words come to mind? What comes to mind when you think of purposeful leadership? What is purposeful leadership? And you can't put sentences, you only can put words. Please. Wow. You guys are smart. I'm gonna minimize now. Here's what you're saying. And I like bringing people's thoughts in the room. Apart in the color, I couldn't control that part. They kind of had that. But I like to bring what you bring into the room, into this talk tonight, because the one thing I see here, and people must have been putting goal-oriented, whoever put that, everything keeps jumping around it. So that means a lot of you felt like goals, a goal-oriented person or goal orientation is important to purposeful leadership. But wow, I see people are still populating answers, so it's going to keep jumping. So whenever people stop, then it will stop. I just learned that. My daughter and I tested this out. You should have seen the words she was putting up there. But I like that we see outcomes. I'm glad that collaboration is beginning to pop up for us. What does it take in terms of leadership? What does it take for that to happen? People. There's a lot of people in a school. What kind of people? I can't hear you. She said committed. People just need to be committed. If you have a principal who is not, and this is no slam to principals, I love them because they made me who I am. They really did. If you have a principal who is not trying to figure out the purpose, your purpose in their school, your role in their school and making that school better for students, then I can show you teachers that are probably on an island, administrators who sort of dread their principal. Purposeful leadership, you are intentional. You are goals-oriented, you are dedicated, humility helps, a visionary, action-oriented. You guys know what purposeful leadership is, but how do we cultivate that as leaders? And don't think because you're not at the top that you cannot cultivate that. I believe in my position, and I tell people all the time, I don't mind leading from the side. I don't mind leading from the bottom. But the positions I shared with you, all of them were support positions in a school. And because I've sat alongside leaders and try to help them solve some of the biggest issues they face in their schools, I have learned so much more about how to be a purposeful leader. Thank you guys for participating in that. And I think I get to save it. Let's get that out. How are we getting it off? I'll just go back to where I was. There we go. The reason I asked you to explore that was because as a teacher, I realized what my purpose was as a teacher. As a leader, I hadn't thought about it until I started conducting research on what effective teaching is. And in 2011, I had the great fortune of sitting alongside some wonderful minds in education at the Grad Nation Summit. Anybody's familiar with Grad Nation Summit? Oh no, look it up. It's a wonderful, wonderful body of work, and they bring together some of the brightest minds in teaching, leadership, education, and they try and solve big issues. Colin Powell is the founder of the organization that launched the Grad Nation. Their very first summit was in 2011. When I sat there, by the way, Randy Warngardner was sitting to my left. We know who that is, right? So I get there and I'm going, this is where I'm supposed to sit? And they said, yeah. And then I look down and the CEO of Apex is there. And then so I said, oh, okay. Wow, you sure I'm supposed to be here? But what was interesting was Randy leaned over and said, I'm saving you for last, just so you know. And I said, well, why? And she said, because as I look at what everyone is here to talk about, I realize you understand your purpose as a teacher, and you understand what it takes to put a teacher on the right purpose. Our topic was teacher effectiveness. And I really wanted to include purposeful leadership because that same purpose you have as a classroom teacher, it really can transfer over into your leadership, regardless of where you are in your leadership role. My daughter teased me and said, I didn't have a name for this quote, and I said, because it's mine. This is my definition of purposeful leadership. I think it's deeply personal and highly transferable in a school or organization. It is the one thing as a leader that you can definitely impart onto other people. But it is deeply personal because if you think about it, you talk to teachers all the time. Right now, if you're going into teaching, it's because you are passionate about it. No one is signing up because, you know what, I want to work with Baltimore City Public School kids. And some people in their interview says they want to close the achievement gap. By the way, I'm recommending that you not say that. I want you to talk more about how you'll do it, but don't spend time saying, I would like to help close the achievement gap. I sat through interviews with teachers like, oh no. But anyway, it is deeply personal and highly transferable in a school or organization. And I hope if you leave here tonight with one thing, I hope you go back and say, what is my leadership purpose? From right where I am. You don't have to have a title to be a leader. Back to my common themes, and then I'm closing out. I had to unpack it a little bit. I literally went through my journal and started looking at some of my answers to some of the things that I said shaped my leadership journey. And I realized excellence in action is deliberate, it's your norm, it's your attitude. So I get joked a lot. Oh, Ms. Davis, you're always working. I hate to say it, a little bit I don't know what else to do, but to me, the needs of students are so great that I need to stay up working. I'm not saying go home and stay up late, but the truth is, I want excellence for students. And so, Mr. Tim Dewey, my assistant principal, anybody in Baltimore City know Tim Dewey? He used to be an assistant principal, master scheduler. He wrote with a pencil and had a really calm voice. Ms. Davis, you did a really good job in your observation. I said, thank you, Mr. Dewey. I think you need to work on a few things. And I said, okay, Mr. Dewey, I'm a new teacher, uncertified, I'm waiting for the, he says, Ms. Davis, what's your definition of educational? Crickets. I said, Mr. Dewey, do I have to answer that right now? I'm always quick with my feet, right? So do I have to answer that right now? I said, I'd like an answer right now. I said, well, I don't have one, Mr. Dewey. I said, if you give me 24 hours, I'll have one. There was no real Googling this, right? I didn't go to the library, I had to pick my daughter up. So it caused me to sit and think, what does academic excellence, educational excellence looks like for a student in Baltimore City? Me as their teacher. And I explored it, and this is what I came back with. It had to be my norm, the expectation that students would succeed. I have some of my former students here, and right now, and I was pretty adamant. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Vicki. I was, right? It was the same thing every day. I made them think that if you miss this class, you're missing everything. You got a doctor's appointment? Oh, you make it on Miss So-and-so's class. You don't make it on my class. What? Oh, we're gonna be out for snow? Oh, so here's what I need you to do. When on the Christmas break, remember I used to say, what time we have class? They would say, oh, this class is 9:15 to 10:30. So over the break, every day over the break from 9:15 to 10:30, do my homework. Right? Remember I used to write y'all Christmas letters? And okay, you remember that. But it was my attitude around excellence. I wanted them to have it. I wasn't an assistant principal. I was a teacher, just like the person next door to me. But as a team leader, I tried to make this my normal, my team. And if you didn't have an excellence attitude, we had to get you one. So I would hope that you would explore that for yourself. Opportunity. Opportunity does not waste time with those of us that are not prepared. It's that simple. They move on to the opportunity will move on to the next person. And all I can tell you about opportunity is, and you hear this a lot, so I don't have a magic bullet on what to say around making you successful, but hard work always pays off. But sometimes you don't have to work harder, you have to work smarter. And it creates opportunities. And one thing I realized early in my career, I didn't have a lot of transfer from school to school. I know a lot of teachers, they transfer from school to school. I only worked at 2 schools. But when I moved over to Johns Hopkins, of course, I started going into schools all over the country. One thing I realized was that the principal would, all right, we'll clear the halls, get all the kids in the classroom. And I remember some principals say, well, what do you have waiting on them? And this was about preparation. And I would tell my new teachers as a mentee, and you might remember, Ms. Willingham, right? I would tell folks, the more prepared you are, the more opportunities you're gonna create, not only for yourself to do well, but for your students. So that became one of my mantras. And I think it helps because it also gives you like a laser-like focus on your intentions every day with students. I couldn't wait to get to this one. Customize your journey. You can create it and curate it. No, I'm not gonna ask anybody what curate means. It was a relatively new term to me too, so don't feel bad. But when I talk about creating your journey, what I used to do is look at what is the issues that my school is trying to solve right now. You can find that in your school improvement plan. And right now, if you're in Baltimore City, the school's overall performance is predicated on the backs of everyone, for the most part, right? The school's data sort of follows you where you go. With that, I would look at where's the issues. And I had the luxury of being a team leader, so my team and I could sort of test out issues on my team. And I see you now, because I used to literally do this, didn't I? So we used to sort of test out what could solve a bigger issue for the school within my team. What I did not know, that it was creating a little buzz around, oh, what is Ms. Davis doing? Oh, maybe we need to look at that, and maybe we need to make it a school thing. I didn't do it to set out to change the school. I wanted the issue solved on my team. But as you know, teams live within the culture of the school. And so, of course, the leadership in the school would come to me and say, well, what are you doing over here? Why are all your kids showing up? Why are all your parents showing up? I realized now that I was sort of creating some opportunities for myself, but I didn't really realize it. I was just doing what I needed to do. But then when you talk about curate, what do I have at my disposal? What are my resources? I no longer, after I adopted this mindset, I no longer felt like I was a teacher deprived. I did not teach from a place of scarcity. If you teach from a place of scarcity, you are transferring that to your students. They're already scarce. They already have that mindset. And I realized that on my little team, and as my supervisor would say, your little sphere of influence, like who can we influence, right? I said, well, the rest of the school could be doing this, but this is what me and my 4 or 5 are gonna do. And it made a difference in the lives of students and myself, but I took my resources and I created learning for myself, for my team, in a little bit of time that I had. We used to do something called P30s. And a P30 is basically powerful 30 minutes. So those of us that only have lunch and don't have common planning, and what I used to call a P30, we come in, we had an issue right up in front of us, and in 30 minutes, we had very targeted talks around how to solve it, what resources were needed. And what I realized, I was sort of curating some ideas for the school leadership team, and actually at that time I didn't know it, but for Johns Hopkins, because they came and asked a few questions about some things. But we can customize our journeys that way, because what it gave me was something different to say in the interviews when it's time for you to get that interview. Because I know you know so many people are interviewing for the same job today, especially in education, right? I think if you take a look at your own career and realize what you do have at your disposal as a resource and leverage that, and I'm talking about my professional career too, because I would write somebody in a minute because I knew what their title was and asked them if they could help me learn something or do something. The last thing I'd say when it comes to sort of creating your pathway, and then we'll move into some other stuff and then we're done, is be original. My daughter says, "Why aren't you ever nervous?" Because I'm really good at being me, and so I'm never nervous. But when it comes to our roles in leadership and in education, I think ours is so different that we get to influence people on many levels, right? We get to influence them on a personal level, an academic level, but being original gives you the ability to be an authentic leader. And for me, it's been my golden ticket. The key choices you make. I put this here really for one reason, because it focuses on talent. I used to ask new teachers, what do you think you're talented at? And the first things they used to say to me was, I really like doing this, I really like doing that, oh, I really love it when I... They didn't tell me what their talent was, they told me what they liked to do. And so, because we used to meet once a month, I always had like reflections. And so one of our reflections I used to give my teachers, and at that time, by the way, in one school, it was like 10 to 12 new teachers. So we talked about what our talents were. Because if you know your own talent and apply it, you can surface that of a student and apply it. That was my mindset. But now as a leader, I realize it is our choices that kind of separates us all. We can all be talented at something, but what you choose to do with that talent sets you apart. And that's why I like this quote, because I think some people are talented and they're really quiet about it. If you're talented in a school that has to solve a problem, I think you should get loud about it. Everything changed for me here. That's all I can say, Dr. Anderson. I'm not going to spend much time here. My path completely changed when I became an employee of Johns Hopkins University. By the way, my first relationship with them was in 1999 as an uncertified teacher teaching freshman seminar in a self-contained environment. My coach used to come out and he used to film me, had me all sweaty because I hate cameras, and he would say, "Oh, I'm taking this back." And I used to think that's what happens because I was new, I didn't know why he was filming me. And he would allow me to review that tape and sort of critique myself. From there, it prompted a whole bunch of other talks with Hopkins, which led to me getting a letter in the mail saying, "Would you like to help us open a school?" No, I would not. Like, that's a lot of work, and I don't have time to do that. Is the pay any different? Oh, no, you would still be a city schools teacher. Oh, no, when you guys work in the summer? Oh, whew. I said no at first. I talked to my sister, rest her soul. I talked to my sister, and my sister said, "Are you crazy, idiot? You better go open a school. Leave the comfort of my school where I am now, where I won awards and stuff. I'm not doing that for some, and it didn't have air conditioning? My hair all messed, no." I had to say that because people from the hot box know what I'm talking about, right? But when I got here as an employee, I feel like I was growing and learning by the minute. They would bring experts in to say, this person is an expert in X, Y, and Z, and we're going to talk about school climate today, and we're going to do it. I was like, wow. So I realized saying yes opened up my life to a whole new way of learning information that I could have never imagined for myself. So if you are in a school and they're about to start something new, a company's coming in because they've been contracted to help you, don't shy away from the opportunity to learn, okay? Don't shy away from that. I ended up becoming an employee and ultimately a student. And I'll say this about being a student here. It was where I realized what it is I had been doing. So I did all these journaling, all these journals and all, but I was never able to put formal titles on some of what I was doing because I had done so much. Being here taught me that. But here's what I heard all the time when I said, I'm coming here. Oh, I know you're going to be a principal. Oh, you'd be a great principal. You've run schools already. You've done this. So for a hot second, yeah, y'all laughing, right? She would be a principal. Oh, yes, said everyone that I talked to about the fact that I was going to get Admin 1 from Johns Hopkins. Even my professors, oh, I know you're going to be the first one to get a school. So for a moment, I put those pants on. I'm gonna be a principal, and I'm gonna be a good principal. And Justin can attest to this. As I went on that journey, yes, I did the interviews. Some jobs I was offered, some I denied, some I didn't get at all, because people didn't understand what a school transformation facilitator was and a school service. What is that? I don't see title of principal. What they wanted me to be, normal. It's our normal path, right? Walking right on up. Oh, I was a teacher for about 5 years, or 2 or 1 year, right? Now I do this. Now I'm a teacher leader, and I oversee this and that. And so I think I'm going to go get my Admin 1 and become assistant principal, and hopefully I get to be the principal. A lot of people I talk to on that normal trajectory to leadership, they want position more than they want influence. She wants me in the picture, okay. They want the position more than the influence. And then when they get there, they don't want it. Here's what I really thought of principals, to be honest, why I never wanted to be one. They always look stressed. They always complain. They always felt like their hands were tied. They couldn't do what they wanted to do. And boy, the district asked me to do another thing with this, and I could just, and I have to tell you about a very famous principal here in Baltimore, and some people know I say his name all the time, Joe Manco, who, when I was a student, I had a little bit of time between, anybody going through the internship program, you have a window of time where you don't get to do your internship. So your classes are done and you got a couple of weeks. Well, I was going crazy. I felt like I have to do more. Like, they think we're gonna be 30 days. I'm in this program for however many months it was, because I finished it a little less than a year. I said, oh no, I'm gonna call all of the principals that I believe are doing something great. Do you know how many great principals are waiting on you to call them to say, can I come be a student under you? Joe Manco was one of the first to open his doors to me long before I started my internship. I remember showing up just with a pad and a paper. It was like, I don't know, something was going to happen where it was a holiday and schools were about to close. He let me stay with him all day long. He showed me how he did business there, how teachers did business there. I saw students teaching. He said, is this part of your program? Because that doesn't normally happen. Oh, what's your title right now? What are you, assistant principal? What are you? I said, sir, I'm a student right now, and I'm just trying to learn from people that I think are getting this thing right. Then I called someone else who said, sure. Then I did a TA day for my company, paid on my own, stayed an extra day, and actually shadowed principals in another state. I'll tell you right now, there was no more normal path for me after that. I realized I could do so many other things other than being the principal. Some of those things made me say, wow, so my career is like an open canvas now, because I saw it that way. For a minute, I was drinking the, you should be a principal Kool-Aid. Now, by the way, I'm not saying I wouldn't be, and I think I'd be a darn good one. But the truth is, I can lead right from where I am and do a good job at that. So everything is blank to me. I don't see myself going one place at all. That's why I had a question mark at the end of that other slide. But here are some of the places I've been, both formal and informal, and no, I didn't list them all. Can anybody guess on the left side? People that know me probably could. One of the things up there I never did. Not with that title. People that know me probably could answer this. Anybody know? Nope. Somebody's whispering. You are. You got it right. I've never been a dean of students. I put that there because I've met a bunch of people who are deans of students, and boy, did they have a lot to teach me about managing student behavior, meeting the non-academic needs of students. I became a student of them. When I was there for TA and I had time, I sat with them to try and figure out how they were doing what they were doing. And their schools were humongous in this particular state. On the right side are things that I actually did that were informal, that was paving a way for me to be a leader, but I never knew it. Some of those things include securing funding for special projects. Think about in a school, right? I ask people all the time who tell me they need some. If you know about Donors Choose, that was the hot thing at the time. And when I did that, I'll never forget, my principal came to me and said, well, when school year starts next year, I want you to, anybody that wants that, I want you to do a 1-hour workshop with them. And I was going, whoa, okay. That means everybody will get what they need. And what I did not know was that that experience was shaping me up for a bigger position once I got here at Hopkins. The last thing I always talk about, because it was short-lived, which is number 6. Did you know that in Baltimore City Public Schools, they used to have teacher ambassadors? Under Dr. Alonzo, there were a set of teachers who were so passionate about bringing teachers into the city that we were requested to be teacher ambassadors. I often wish that program would have stayed because it allowed us to recruit students, talk to teachers who were on improvement plans. It gave us the opportunity to work with them. That was an informal thing that led to much bigger conversations about teacher improvement for me that I never saw coming. Last thing, or one thing before the last thing, it's a few insights I have for you. Number 1, know and understand the leadership model of your school or your district. I have met folks all over the country that really don't know. How are they acquiring talent? How are they tapping talent in schools? If you have a principal who is not creating pockets for talent to grow and live in the school, you can help move that principal along by showing up talented and competent in an area that he needs help with on his improvement plan. And then he'll say, hey, Ms. Willingham, let me talk to you about that. You know, students who participated in that did this, but understand your leadership model. For example, I know in our school district it's a little different, but everybody has different titles and you know where they go, right? A resource teacher or this. Not everywhere is the same, so know your school district's model. Learn your leadership strengths and use them from your current position. Please don't learn them and wait for them until you become a principal. You may never become a principal and you're missing out on opportunities to influence hundreds, maybe thousands of students. Number 3, don't seek a position or title, seek to make a difference. I think it's self-explanatory because other things come after that. You know, my daughter jokes me that things just sort of fall in my lap. I said, didn't you hear them say I worked a whole lot and you were the last kid at daycare and I was trying to sort. The truth is I was prepared for moments, right? But I didn't seek a title or a position. Find leaders who are already who you aspire to be. I am so thrilled that in education there are tons of rock stars. Don't let the overall culture of education fool you. There are rock stars in education, and I will reach out to them in a heartbeat and ask them to share something. And if you really think about it, just think about what you do in education right now. If somebody picked up the phone and called you because of a project you posted on Twitter and asked you to help them create one for their school, you would feel pretty darn good inside. I think we have a lot of phenomenal educators that we don't tap. And for some reason, we think that they're, I don't know. We don't tap enough of them, that's all I can say. But find somebody that wants to be where you're trying to go. And then finally, develop your definition of what educational excellence means for the teachers and the students that you want to serve. My experience in Baltimore City, quite different than my experience in Baltimore County, which, by the way, I used to be a substitute teacher in Baltimore County, and I used to be a night school teacher in Baltimore County. They don't call it night school anymore, right? But I was able, now remember I told you, it wasn't until about 5 years into my career that I even examined this question. And let's see who can read this. Can anybody read that? Do they ever? So here's what I realized. All of this time, I'm doing all these little quirky things, service learning. I always saw school differently. But I never thought I was leading. I didn't think I was moving in a leadership direction. Everyone always told me that. I listened sometimes, and sometimes I thought, they're crazy. I'm not going to be a principal. I just want to keep teaching and doing what I'm doing and helping kids. But I realized leaders, really good leaders, always see things differently. They can sit in a meeting with 200 other principals. About 150 of them are going to go back to school and give the same message to their staff the same way. District said we got to do this, so y'all know what I'm saying, right? And then there's about 50 dynamic principals that are going to go back and try and figure out how to transfer that. I hope, if you take nothing away from tonight, that you become a lot more reflective about your experience. I guarantee you, you're already doing something that will be on a path to creating the leadership paths or wherever it is you're trying to go, principal, whatever that is. I don't knock anybody for where they're trying to go. But if you start leading from right where you are, you'll see results probably in your space or your sphere of influence and in your school. My final thought is from John Dewey, and it says, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on it. I have a ton of experiences. Not all of them will get me a good job, right? But if I reflect on those experiences and bring that to the forefront, it allows you self-improvement. Think about how we help new teachers or teachers who are on an improvement plan. We're always asking them to reflect. And that would be my tidbit of advice to you, is to start reflecting on your experience so far. I don't care where you are in your career. I don't care if you're not even in a school. If you're trying to go somewhere else, it'll help you sell who you are to who you're interviewing with. If you want to stay in touch with me, which I hope you do, here's how to do it. I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is there. And then my personal email. I am just thrilled that anyone found my journey to be of interest. Thank you for coming out on a Monday cold night right before Thanksgiving and hearing my story. And I look forward to answering questions from all of you.
So now we are going to transition to the part where all of you have an opportunity to participate. We are going to begin with a Q&A from our JHU SLC president, Sharonda Willingham, with some questions that she has prepared for our guest speaker this evening. Our audience, there's a microphone here if you have questions once President Willingham has finished her questions. And for those of you who are online, we also have our chat room open, and our JHU SLC treasurer, Malcolm Rowe, will be curating, to use the word of the evening, the questions from our online chat. And if you are tweeting, please make sure that you use the hashtag #GreaterImpact2017. And if you aren't tweeting, please get on and start tweeting, or at least liking my tweets. Thank you very much.
You put that one on, yeah. So thank you, Ms. Davis, for sharing your wisdom with us tonight. And you brought a very good perspective about leadership. I want to sum it up as leading from the margins, that one does not need a position or a title to have influence, but you can do it from the margins. So my question with that is, how do I help other people to see that they can lead from the margins? How do you do that?
I think something I said earlier was, I think if you're working closely with someone, allowing them the opportunity to sort of explore their talents, their natural talents, and their teaching or leadership purpose. I think when you surface that and allow folks to reflect on that, then you can really get at someone feeling comfortable and confident, because you gotta be confident to be a leader. You are the most criticized person in the school. Everything you say and do will be under scrutiny. Half your staff won't like you because you know. So I think helping folks be reflective on their leadership, their purpose for leading would be helpful.
So from that, it seems like a leader have to create an openness from his or her staff that they have the space to do that.
Yes.
So my next question is, how do you help a leader see that that needs to happen in order for an organization to grow and move?
One thing I can say about helping leaders find what I call pockets of capacity, right? So you want to build capacity in your school. And one thing you have to be able to do is look at who you have on staff. I remember working with a school where we kind of had to redesign the school from the ground up. And the beauty of that is, and this principal had a masterful mind. He was eager for it. And he had all of his staff, every staff member had a piece of chart paper. It was up in his office, and it had their experience, their degrees, projects they had done. When I walked in, I said, oh, this school will be changed in a few minutes. And what happened was, we were then able to look at his staff and redesign his school in a way that those teachers would have time to meet and talk. We did find a couple of dollars in Title II funds to compensate professional development, additional professional development. We did find the pocket to create parent academies, and we realized that this school had a 4x4 plus one, and because they had that plus one, we were able to bring families in during school hours. But what's important about that is, I think sometimes leaders are burdened with a lot of things, and looking at their school and trying to create another PLC or doesn't always register with them. So I think starting with the talent in the school is a great place to begin. But how are we looking at talent in our staff? That's really important, right? And sometimes it's something as simple as who has what degree, who wants to do something, and who's really good at it.
Okay, thank you for that. In your talk, you talked about how you have worked with school leaders across the country. And I want you to synthesize, working with all the leaders that you've worked with, what's the number one leadership trait that you saw effective leaders have?
Wow, that's a really good question. The number one leadership trait that I thought effective principals had, they had the ability to inspire folks. And none of them were above their staff. They were embedded in their staff. They were the principal. They carried a big stick. But every time they faced a challenge, they were together in that challenge. I had a principal, great principal, Mr. Robinson. He would make us feel that way. He would make us feel that way. He would get his numbers back and say, uh-oh, we're in trouble. But we're in trouble together. So you feel like, oh, we can solve the problem together. And I think great principals are able to do that, but that requires you for a little bit to humble yourself. And don't be afraid to tell your staff what you don't know. I'd love that question to be answered on Twitter too. I'd love to see what people are saying about that question. We could tweet that question out. I'd like to see that.
Okay. Well, that's all I have, and we can now turn it to the audience. So if you have a question, please come to the mic.
Nobody wants to be on camera. Questions? Good evening.
You're very humble, and we really appreciate that part of your character traits as well. But you never talk about difficulties, struggles, and some of the most challenging situations you face in your 21 years in education. Wow. Can you give us at least two?
Yes. One thing I struggle with to this very day in my 21-year leadership journey, I guess, is containing my ideas. And you may say that's not a problem. Well, it really is, because sometimes when you come into a school or organization that has a set vision for something, you have to figure out how to transfer your ideas to what would support the vision and the mission of the school. So that's one challenge I have. I write a lot for that reason. So sometimes if I'm in a meeting or you see me with folks and I'm writing, I'm just trying to jot down my thoughts that I'm having. The other thing I would say was a challenge is sometimes we make a difference, but it's so small. I think for me, I mean, I've had over 25 mentor teachers and worked in I don't know how many states and schools, but how many students did I really get across the stage to get a diploma? That used to keep me up at night. And the challenge with that is everything that keeps a kid from getting a diploma. So I really still struggle with, I used to feel so sorry for my kids. Oh, my kids didn't need me to feel sorry for them. They needed me to raise my expectation for them. And so I really struggle with how far to push that bar, because sometimes I used to get in trouble. Your classroom is too loud, Ms. Davis. You're doing this, you're doing that. But I was trying to push the envelope in my instruction. And so those are some of the struggles I had all the time. Like, my journal is filled with, I don't know if I did my best today, or only 80 kids passed and I wanted 100 kids to pass. So I really struggle with that. Oh, boy. People are watching.
You know how to say this person? Okay, so the first question is from Tora Lloyd Jackson. She said, how do you continue to learn now that you have become a principal? I'm guessing she meant...
Could you say it again, please?
So she said, how do you continue to learn now that you have become a principal? And what else would you like to accomplish for yourself and your school? So I think she was a little mistaken.
Okay. So just for clarity, I'm not a principal yet, if I should become one. That is not out of the cards for me. Every time I get an evaluation for my work, I always ask my supervisor the same question: how can I grow? And what happens from here? And I don't know what's next for me. I definitely would like to continue to influence as many kids and teachers as possible. I love leadership, but it's interesting because I love it from the side. So I'm not real sure. I know, how could you love leadership from the side and then say you want to be a principal? I'm still working on that.
Leading from the margins.
Right, leading from the margins. That's right, Ms. Willingham. But I always see myself as a professor. Sometimes I just see that's down the line. But as of right now, I'm a specialist, and I love being a specialist, and I love what I do. I still get to have wonderful conversations with principals. They call me a thought partner. I love being a thought partner, and that's an informal title that gives me tons of experience. So, I don't know what's next for me. I don't know if they saw that one slide that had the question mark at the top, Is there another question? I thought he said it was two.
Yes, it's another one.
Okay.
Okay. This is from Claire Melpaz. She asks, what has been the most powerful or influential book you've read that has driven your passion for leadership?
Wow. In the past, how long I go back? Because I got a lot of books. Can I go back recently?
She just said, what has been the most
Oh, okay. One of the most impactful books out. The 360-degree leader book, in terms of my career, has been helpful. But I can read almost anything and apply it to my career. The other book I'm reading right now is Oprah's new book, something about Sundays. I'm sorry, because I just started it. It just came out. But it's
Super Soul Sunday.
It's written based on her Super Soul Sunday series, because she has all types of leaders on there who, like the leader of Starbucks, is talking about the journey he had to help and really bring out the talent in his staff. I feel like some of those things could be applicable to my career, so that's what I'm reading currently. But I read a lot of books on leaders, though, so that's why I was asking how far we go back. Maybe I'll post them on Twitter.
Okay. Somebody just posted another one. Does anybody else have any questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Davis. This has been awesome so far. So kind of a big picture question. You mentioned at the beginning that you're from Cleveland, so not from Baltimore. And I'm curious how kind of when you first got started, how much time that you spent really understanding the Baltimore community and kind of how you, how those experiences kind of interplayed with your ultimate successes. And you also mentioned that you've been in a lot of different places. So how much time do you spend at each school, like each environment, getting to know the community before you apply yourself as a leader?
Wow, this is a wonderful question, because it ultimately became one of my biggest teachers. So the first thing I'll say to you is, when I came to Baltimore, I spent about that much time learning about Baltimore. I was a substitute teacher first in Baltimore County and a summer school teacher in Baltimore County. And I left Baltimore County teaching summer school. I remember asking to leave 30 minutes early to go to the city job fair and to get hired on the spot, because they said they'll hire teachers on the spot. I was just offered a position at a high school in Baltimore County, but the city was calling me, so I told I gotta leave 30 minutes early. I get there, Tim Dewey was interviewing me, and he says, "What you know about Baltimore?" I said, "Sir, nothing, but I am a product of Cleveland Public Schools, and I'd like to think some of those experiences are synonymous to what you guys face here." I let my students teach me about the city. So remember in American government, right? Yeah, government student here. First week of school, they always got the same assignment every year. And I wanted them to explain to me what it meant to be an American citizen or something or another, or something like that. They all would write me back, talking about why they don't like being a citizen or why they do, and start talking about their communities. One year, you know, they start telling me about their stories. And I learned about Baltimore that way. I was a history teacher, so it made it a little easy. So I was able to relate that. So when I started something in my classroom called Class Researcher, if you actually Google that, it is now on Education World's Best Idea Ever. But I started that, and what kids would be tasked with is bringing me answers to questions that I didn't know. And I would give them service learning hours, because they were ultimately teaching the class in that moment. Because I didn't know about Baltimore. I didn't know who the history of, you know, mayors were and things like that. So that sort of brought me into their world. And, you know, like one time we did a project on the rec centers in our zip codes. They had to pick a zip code. So I was learning about Baltimore every day. And then we started taking field trips and doing service projects, and you learn about the city quickly. I can honestly say, though, you know, having grown up in an urban environment really prepared me to be a teacher in an urban environment. But I've also met teachers who have never had that experience and have found themselves in an urban environment. But, you know, respecting the kids, they'll tell you anything. They'll tell you anything. And then the second part of your question was about the schools. So when I worked here at Hopkins, I did technical assistance. And that's another thing. That's a great resume builder. Now, you say, how long are you in the school? Well, when you do TA, a school district will contract with your company. We want Ms. Davis to come, some places, 40 days this year. And I'm like, wow. What happens is you have to divide those days up over the course of the school year. So there were times where I was in a school one day, open to close. I often stayed after to work with the principal, talk with the principal. And then I wasn't coming back again for another 2 weeks. So I had to be extremely targeted. The P30 approach to working with schools helped me a lot. Principals don't have more than 30 minutes during the school day, right? Teachers, let alone, if, you know, planning periods are short. So one of the things I would do was, we laid my schedule out for the year. So if I had 40 or 50 days, when I did go to a school, I stayed there the entire day. I would go and be gone for about a week, though. My daughter didn't like that so much, but I would be in a city for about a week. And then as things just got a little better for me on the evaluation front, it kind of, Justin might remember, it grew a lot faster. So I was going every 2 weeks to places, and it was a pretty hard grind, but it was a wonderful learning experience.
I have a question.
Oh, boy. Not any more than me.
You mentioned two things that caught my attention. One, I think your role is educational options specialist.
Yes, sir.
The second one that caught my attention was the fact that you said you have to sometimes contain your ideas. But when you talked about being an educational option specialist, you talked about that being a situation where you're able to grow and actually shape the position based upon the schools and the county's needs. So I work closely with you at Woodlawn, and as an educational optional specialist, there are certain things embedded in that position where you see different problems and symptoms within a school. Has the county talked about and prepared you to be able to extend your reach into not just fixing the symptoms, but also going into the schools and identifying issues that are getting in the way of students being able to adequately and efficiently obtain credits?
So within my program is the opportunity for me to influence how students recover credits or accelerate in learning. I'm also able to work closely with principals when necessary, especially those of you who have great questions about how to improve programs in your school. But in terms of something more formal, if I heard you correctly, in terms of, just talking about how to do this work. So Educational Options has different programs. And all of our programs, have their focus. What you're talking about is more on the organizational development side in terms of working with schools around talking about how to help kids recover credits. It's interesting because I had a very short conversation with my supervisor today about how important that work is. So I have not, our focus could shift, but right now, as an educational specialist, I do the best that I can in that role.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Davis.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Same to you.
Yes. So recently I've made a transition from Baltimore City Public Schools to Anne Arundel County Public Schools. And I have really taken a big interest in equity. We have an equity office within the district, and I do a lot of work. But I really would just like to hear more about your experiences with equity in your context, especially suburban context versus an urban, because that's something that I'm experiencing right now.
So the one thing I'll say to you about urban versus suburban before we start talking about equity is if you look at some of the research out on what's considered an urban school and a suburban school, because of the way Maryland is shaped, right? You can be right here in a suburban school and be right here in an urban school. We also know that the poverty pockets are growing. With that said, and you're in what school district?
I'm in Anne Arundel, but I'm
Okay.
in the Title I school.
Okay. Our school district right now, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Baltimore County employee, but I think we are leading some of the brightest work around equity-centered leadership in our district. And I can only stand here and say that and use that as a value because our former CEO made equity a priority. He created a space for us to talk about the things that hinder us from being good at implementing equity-centered leadership, making equity-centered leadership decisions. I would start there. We have an equity office, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think we just did a webinar last week or so. You can Google that webinar and listen in on it. But I would also maybe talk to your school district about, okay, so equity's on the forefront, one of our goals. How are we resourcing ourselves? How can I help? How can I become a part of that? The equity, you've got some people here in Baltimore that sit on the boards of some of the equity organizations. I would actually tap them if I were you. I know Baltimore City CEO, Santalise, she's one of the members of some of the leading equity work in the country. So.
Thank you.
Okay. We have another question from Christine Rice. She said, what is the hallmark of a great marginal leader? So I'm guessing she's using Ms. Willingham's leading from the margins type.
I would say if you're leading from the margins, do the best you can to influence what's around you, because if you do it right, it'll sort of reverberate through the school, right? It'll have a ripple effect in a school. I think sometimes people do things to get attention for it, and not look at the fact that our end user is the most important person in whatever you're doing in a school, and that's that student. And so I think if you really work at, if you're a team leader or you have the ability to bring teachers into your room at lunchtime and talk through an issue, things like that. But I think you should start where you are. Like, you could be a leader. Schools that have issues have a lot of people that could step up, and it not just fall on a assistant principal or people are waiting. I know when I first became a teacher, I waited to be told what to do, because that's what you do, right? When you're a teacher, you follow your principal. One thing I can say, I realized after a short while, I better come with my own ideas about this. I see the school working towards that, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so I would say to that person, leading from the margins would require you to really look at who you're trying to influence. Who do you have at your disposal to influence? You have other teachers that could assist you in doing something for, that would improve your students' academic outcomes. Start there. If you even put a note in everybody's mailbox saying, anybody free this period to talk about how to handle the school uniform issue, that could help.
We have one more on the chat too.
Wow.
I'm a little short. Earlier, you said you paid special attention to leaders who were good at addressing the non-academic needs of the students. So could you identify a couple of them that you met in your career, how you tackled those issues and the effectiveness on the students' learning when those needs were met?
So you would like for me to just rephrase that a little bit, the first part, because you asked me, I think, like two
It's like
questions.
3 things. So the first one is you said you paid special attention to the leaders and how they met the non-academic needs of the students. So could you identify a couple of things that you came across when you were teaching your students, how you might have addressed those from a teacher's standpoint, and how effective it was in child's learning? You get what I'm saying?
Yep, got it. So one of the things, I often tell this story, the school I taught at here in Baltimore that I helped open, used to get a lot of visitors. I used to tease the principal and say, I'd like us to have a wardrobe stipend. We always have visits here. And so it was the first day of school, and the school did not have air conditioning, 90 plus degrees. The superintendent, the governor, and all the news people and all their entourage was visiting. They came walking through my classroom, 9 o'clock on the dot. And here I am, government, nothing about government up other than the bulletin boards, but I was teaching students how to use my classroom. And then I was beginning to talk about the assignment I needed them to do. I wanted to learn as much about my students as possible. And so I would give them essays, but it was easy topics. It was things like, tell me about a time you solved a problem. Just something random. And what I would do is file that away. And reading that told me a whole lot about students, not just whether they could write or not, but what they had been through, how they see life, how they see school. That's a really good one. Boy, I remember the year I asked them how they see school. What you want to know? That's what you want to know. But from there, I would take that, and I would have conferences with my students, it's like progress conferences, and they all had folders. So back to school night or parent night, when we would have families in, if whoever's family would show up, sometime I'd give them a half sheet of paper and ask them to write their kid or child a note and, a word of encouragement or something like that. And I would file that away in a student's file. So when I went to have progress conferences, I mean, it was just a manila folder, open it up. I used to have dates there of the different assignments I had given kids. When it comes to non-academic needs, I remember I used to have a phone hotline when I taught at Forest Park Senior High. And I don't know if anyone remembers, you used to get multiple phone numbers years ago. We run out of numbers now in Baltimore, but I used to have 2 phone numbers. So one of my phone numbers, it used to ring differently. And as some people remember, that became my homework hotline at Forest Park, and they could call up till 11 o'clock. And I never got calls about homework as much, but I would get calls about, Miss Davis, my mom didn't come in last night. How do I I need a note, I don't have a note, do I still come to school tomorrow? I'm coming off suspension. But what I realized, and I didn't engage in a lot of personal conversations, but giving students a different way of telling you their story. It could be through writing, it could be through a project. But I was fortunate enough to work in a school where once we learned what kids did not have, we went after getting it for them. In one school, we knew we need a washer and dryer, we got a washer and dryer. And you share that with your team, you share that with other folks who are teaching those same students. That meeting the non-academic needs of students doesn't really occur in the classroom. Good teaching helps, but meeting those needs really require a team. And I would say forming teams to solve problems was one of the ways I was able to do that. And kids trusted me, and I wanted them to know they could trust me because I trusted them as well. And when you like kids, it's easy to try and meet their needs.
Okay, one more question from the web chat. Wow. Danielle Dowdy, what has been your most challenging experience on your journey as an educator, and how do you think this experience has contributed to your success?
Wow, my most challenging experience would probably be answering that question of where do you go from here? People are always asking me that. And I find it to be a challenge because when I do something, I'm really committed to it. I get really attached to it. But I know I gotta let it go. In education, kids graduate. People know. I'm so glad I used to facilitate the graduations because I got to say my own personal goodbye. But the challenge for me is deciding where to go next. So one thing I'm learning to do with that challenge is to not worry about it and just let it happen, do the best I can where I am. That's not easy when folks are sort of telling you, oh my God, you should do this and you should be here and you should. So I'm trying to just stay in that zone of letting things come to me, but constantly doing my best will make your path, you create your path. Oh, Justin.
I pretty much just wrote this question down. It says, what special education strategies and techniques have you used for yourself, not only being a teacher, but being a specialist and still learning at what you do right now?
So when I was a special educator, anybody knows the Good Shepherd School is a therapeutic treatment center for emotionally disturbed girls. And then I spent 5 years as a special educator in the classroom. So Justin, I'll be honest, the first year or so, I really don't know what I did well with that, Justin. I knew I taught government well because we had our first pastors on the HSA. So I knew I did something right there. But I was just trying things. And that's why I said I always have ideas. So innovation matters. If I tried something, I wasn't afraid to put it down and try something else. Teachers, some of the new teachers I think used to get stuck in that. So as a special educator, I sort of had the degree, but remember, in special ed, it's about experience. You can learn everything, pass the test, but that's experience. And Justin, when it comes to working in special education, I feel like the needs of students vary so much, from reading to math, social skills, and that's something I focused on. I don't care what the IEP said. I focused on job readiness, social skills. That's why I love teaching freshman seminar. That really helped build confidence in my students. In terms of me being a specialist now, I get to work with folks who are trying to still solve issues for students or support students with special needs, but a whole lot of other things too. Curriculum writing really, really helped me with that because if you know, our classroom teachers really struggle with taking a curriculum and adopting and making modifications for students. And I would say in the role that I have now, even though the content is digital, I find myself helping teachers do that a lot.
Can we please give our guest speaker a round of applause? Okay. Hi, I apologize. I'm having a little bit of difficulty because I'm the designated guest tweeterer. So I have been preoccupied with trying to make sure that we capture all of these nuggets. I'm so excited to have all of you in this room this evening because as I look out across this audience, I see such a varied breadth of experience in the realm of educational leadership. And as many of you know, you've had lots of questions about what it actually means to be an educational leader and what it takes to be an educational leader. And I could not think of anyone who had walked this varied journey to come tonight and speak to you about this pathway that has zigs and zags, but ultimately really leads to making a greater impact better than our guest speaker. I've known her for probably about 6 or 7 years now, and I can tell you that the first time that I met her, I had gone out to the school where she was training teachers and doing leadership development in Baltimore City, and the principal wasn't there that day. Well, there wasn't a principal.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But there was a ram in the bush. And what I was totally thrown by was that here was this person who was literally running a school without benefit of the title, but with knowledge of what it took to move the work. And I know that with many of you, I've had the conversation where you've had the kind of deer in the headlights look of, what do I do now that I've gotten this Admin 1 certificate? Or, what do I do with my life now because I feel that there's something next for me? But I wanted to make sure that you all were introduced to this rock star because she had that same conversation in my office.
Oh, boy.
Right?
Yes, we did. I remember the question.
Lots of tears and tissues.
Yep.
So I say that to say that you too have a purpose in this journey to making a greater impact for our kids. When I was at her school, I kept being just totally thrown back by the idea that this one person had the instructional prowess, had the educational know-how, and spoke the language of a leader. But she wasn't seeking the title. She didn't need the accolades. She just had her sleeves rolled up and she was doing the work. And her experience just made such an impression on me that day. I came back and I was reporting out to our then dean who had said, go out and figure out what we have to do. And he said, what did you see? And I said, well, I can tell you this. There's one person there that I can see who's going to change the world. And here she sits.
Wow.
So when she came to my office and said, like many of you in our audience, both virtual and here in person, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I said, I don't know how you don't know, because it's written all over you. And so I hope that you can now see that the pathway to leadership is not linear. There are lots of twists and lots of turns, but it's all for your good. Because just like our speaker this evening had lots of experiences that have gotten her thus far on her journey, and be sure that she has many miles to go in her leadership journey.
Wow.
And her impact will be far and wide. You too will be making a greater impact someday because of your vision, because of your ideas, because of your capacity to support and grow and love on other people, but most importantly, to keep our children's academic success forefront in your minds. So, I'm very excited that Ms. Davis was our guest this evening.
Thank you so much.
And if I wasn't trying to tweet so much, I would have more to say. But we do have a nice gift for her this evening.
No, I hate this.
It's a small token of our appreciation of JHU School of Education goodies. So could we give her a round of applause for her face?
Thank you very much. Wow, thank you. Now, I'm a founding member of Toastmasters. I should not be saying but I'm a little speechless now. This is, my first speech in Toastmasters, we had to title them, and someone's here who's in my chapters. Remember, we had to make a title. And my speech was entitled, Living on Purpose Without Even Knowing It. That's how I feel about this journey. And so to be here now and to have someone interested in my story is really, it's not easy for me to comprehend that, but I'm humbled by it. And I believe educators are rock stars. So go out and change your school, change the world. And I appreciate you just sharing this journey with me tonight. Thank you. Thank you.